In this session, we will have hot topics in resiliency. And to introduce our first track and the rest of the tracks throughout the day, I'm pleased to introduce today's track moderator, Dave Vanderbloemen, who is an esteemed partner of All Hazards Consortium. He's a member of our Storm School Committee. I think I have a slide. There you go. Principal consultant of DV Consulting. And then where are you based out of, Dave?
I'm in just outside of Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, Virginia. Okay, not too far from me. I'm in Maryland. So, Dave, why don't you go ahead and say a couple of words about yourself and take it away.
All right, as Laura said, I'm a retired utility professional, I guess, 42 years at Dominion Energy, retired in 2019. I've been a member of All Hazards Consortium since 2005, I believe, and one of the original members on the Fleet Working Group. Tom Moran and I go way back and can share a lot of stories. But when I was asked if I could help moderate this, I said yes. Not only because it's a cool thing to do, but I get to meet so many really neat professionals, just like the first session today is. So we got 5 hours of back-to-back, no break sessions. So and a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first session today is titled Digital Exhaust. What is it? Why should it be part of your 2023 mitigation strategy? And just briefly, to succeed in today's competitive and increasingly digital environment, you not only have to understand the needs of your customers and clients, it's even more important to understand the means and tactics your competitors or adversaries may use to thwart your ambitions. Today, we're extremely fortunate to have 4 experts actually in these tactics and technologies to not only explain these risks more clearly, to provide some key strategies you can implement in your own organizations to reduce this cyber risk. So now I'm honored to introduce the 4 extremely qualified panelists. Antoinette King, as you can see, she's highly credentialed in physical and cybersecurity. She's the founder of Credo Cyber Consulting, LLC. She's also the co-chair of the Digital Exhaust Intelligence Group. Joining her is Jody Masters Gonzalez. She's FHA CEO of Humble Science, LLC. She's also a co-chair of the Digital Exhaust Intelligence Group, CSC member, and NDRC 36 Stratagems Working Group. And we also have James, who's a supervisory intelligence agent with the FBI out of Kansas City. Finally, recently added to this team was Dr. Keeper L. Sharkey, and I'll let them introduce and provide a little bit more bio about them all. So looking forward to the session, and the floor is yours, team.
All right, thank you so much. My name is James. I'm going to kick it off and just kind of scope some things for you today. I want to be judicious, but I want to lay the groundwork for you. You've heard, obviously, these ladies have much better bios than I do. I apologize for not showing my face. I promise you're missing nothing and not seeing that. So I'm hoping my radio voice will compensate today. I just want to thank you for being here. I know you had many other panels and areas, the things that you could choose from. So thanks for being here. This is an important topic. It's one that's close to our hearts, and each one of us has our own unique journey. So gonna kind of scope some things and we'll move on through. So I am happy to be here today. This definitely has a big fight feel, so I'm excited about that. I was reminiscing, I'm in my mid 40s, how life used to be so much simpler before technology became mainstream, right? So I missed those days when as a kid, I would just sit in front of my tiny television, hastily consuming my Pizza Hut meat lovers pizza, knocking back cold cans of ice cold Pepsi, right? Blissfully unaware of my future self's need for omeprazole. So how am I in the FBI? Well, I've been here 18 years. I joined in 2004. I joined the federal government to give back after 9/11. That's really the arc of my journey. And I absolutely am so proud of the accomplishments I've had. I'm most proud of the men and women that I've had to work with over my career. But anyone who knows me knows that I don't value my career, right? So for me, it will never love me back. What matters is people. And that's really how I started this journey on digital exhaust. So my key responsibility in life is my family. I'm a husband and father, and my goal is to ensure the safety of my family. And my job, unfortunately, lends itself to all threat actors being in play. So several years back, I realized that I did not have the resources I needed to protect myself. And so I built my own. And then I gave them back to the FBI. And that is how we reached this point today. So I wear many hats. I'm a husband by marriage covenant. I'm a father by choice. I'm an analyst by trade, but I'm also a man who deeply understands what the threat landscape looks like and how it can affect my family. Every year, every moment, we are increasingly moving to a data-driven world, and the byproduct of that data is our digital exhaust, and that is more than simply what is expelled into the internet. It has become its own ecosystem, and it is impacting all of us. So uh, I'll have you roll the poll question for me while I'm talking, if that's okay, because I wanted to kind of frame this for all of you. This is really the first question that I have, and the most basic one on this journey. What's more important to you, privacy or convenience? And I think that's really the threat issue at hand, because it's not that the data itself is bad. It is the intent of someone and how they will use that. So my goal today is to introduce you to some really cool people, open a dialogue that will help foster a greater awareness of just how easy it is for a variety of threat actors to target you and your loved ones in very easy ways. A lot of the technologies that are rolling out did not exist 4 and 5 years ago. All of that has changed. So everything I'm telling you today, everything that you're going to hear from the panelists, anyone that knows me, I practice what I preach. This ecosystem does not care about your status or influence. It is a tyranny that impacts us equally. So what is digital exhaust? What can it do? Well, here's what it can do. It can reveal your interests, your income, your hobbies, the types of devices you own, how many devices you own, what websites you visit. And collectively, that data can be used to produce a pattern of life about you that can be used for a number of reasons. It can be used for things like advertising, where maybe you know that your dog needs food every 2 weeks and you want it delivered. Certainly convenience, right? But from a privacy perspective, perhaps you work in an industry that lends itself to targeting. That can also create a pattern of life that can be targeted with a specific intent by specific threat actors. So what I'm hoping you walk away from today is that this threat intelligence process, when we take that data and use it differently, is something that can be used against all of us, right? And we need to develop this mentality about our personal information, that we need to guard that and that we need to understand that. And that's what you're going to hear from some of my other panelists. Otherwise, you're going to get burned faster than you can pull up the location of the nearest fire station in Google Maps. I absolutely promise you that. Um, so many of our vulnerabilities come down to an ignorance of simple settings, as technology is absolutely moving at a blistering pace. So that kind of scopes for you what digital exhaust is, right? It is data driven and is a byproduct of the things that we're doing online. And it's painting a picture about all of us in totality. So what's the impact of that? Well, the genie is never going to go back in the bottle. We are constantly facing a greater proliferation of our data, and it is becoming more accessible than ever before, as all of us are tethered to devices and mobile apps that we use for everyday life. So for me, in my career, I've had a number of different threat actors that have threatened my family, that have been very interested in what I do. That could have been from a counterterrorism perspective, counterintelligence, cyber, criminal, you name it, I've run the gamut, right? So the more that you understand how this vulnerability exists, the more you can start to take measures to control that. And then you really don't have to worry about things going bump in the night quite as much. Why? Because you're pretty aware of who you are. So you'll hear from the panelists too, right? That risk mitigation, right? How do we map those things out? How do we understand who we are? Because all of our identity is essentially online anymore. And it is something that we need to understand and protect and control. So I'll ask you this, and it's rhetorical, but I'm sure you'll answer in text. Would any of you let a stranger sit outside your home, taking photos of your house, measuring your house without you challenging them? Probably not. Would you let a stranger walk through your home and take detailed notes about your interior layout? Chances are no. My guess is most of us lock our doors and use curtains at night, right? So you need to start thinking about that from a digital exhaust perspective. Um, these threat actors are able to loiter and just essentially go through your life, right? So if you don't understand the spectrum of how they can exploit you, you're going to absolutely lose the capability to reduce any opportunities to disrupt threat actors' abilities to execute on that exploitation. So One of the things that the panelists and I discussed prior to getting on was that essentially, right, it's like a weapon of mass disruption. It's a digital dirty bomb. It can impact every aspect of your life. So if you've ever had to deal with a threat, I want you to stop and remember how that feels emotionally and how much that disrupted you. So that is really what we're trying to avoid is what do you do? How can you be targeted? Do you have a risk assessment model in place? And do you understand that this problem's not going anywhere and it impacts all of us? Um, how it impacts us is very individual specific in how you live your lives, but none of us are going to escape this problem. And we wanted to introduce that narrative here for you today. So my personal journey was like I told you, I took those actions because I didn't have it. And now there has been a guide built for specific industries that's available through InfraGard if you join. And I can tell you right now, I've spent well over 3,700 hours just on this guide since 2019. And as of right now, I have not found anything better in the world, and I've been told it's the best in the world. So these are not my words. I don't get paid to say that. You all pay me every April 15th as a public servant. So I appreciate you paying your taxes. So we have a complex ecosystem that can absolutely impact you. And where does that leave us emotionally? I can tell you where it left me. It kind of felt hopeless when I first started this journey. So I want to leave you with this. Remember the rule of 5. If you go out every day to a large tree or whatever problem set that is for you, and you take 5 swings at it with a very sharp axe, eventually, right, no matter how large that tree, it's going to come down. So is it a complex system? Yes. Does it have an impact? Yes. Can you do something? Yes. I am more concerned about your mindset today and coming into this, that you're educated and you're aware and that you hear from these incredible panelists what you can do. And that is my part, and I'll move on to our next panelist.
Thank you so much, James. James's story and his passion about this topic really inspired, I think, all of us to jump onto this bandwagon of educating people about digital exhaust. So as we get started, the layout of the way that we're all going to discuss this, I'm going to cover the topic of how digital exhaust affects the individual. And Jody will then move on to expand from the individual into organizations and how it could impact organizations. So as I get started, I wanted to kind of explore some of the terminology. We talk about digital exhaust. People often hear the term digital footprint. You know, what's the difference between the two things? And I'd like to first start with digital footprint. People are usually used to hearing that terminology. And when we think about a digital footprint, we really think about the data trail that you as the individual leave about yourself online. So that means, you know, the engagements that you have on social media, content that you're putting out there about yourself, that's the information that leaves that, you know, proverbial digital footprint. Digital exhaust takes it beyond the digital footprint. It's data that's on the internet about you that has been either created by you or by others, right? Then collected and used for a purpose. Some of the sources of digital footprint, digital exhaust could be things like networking platforms, social media platforms, your browser, websites you visit, mobile applications, financial institutions that you work with, medical facilities, and those are just some of them. But what I really want people to understand is that digital exhaust goes beyond the things that you think that you may have control with. So I would like the poll question to pop up now, if you don't mind. Perfect. So are you aware of the language used around data collection in the terms and conditions of applications that you install on devices? Jody and I had a real good conversation around this when we were prepping for this session, because the terms and conditions that we see that we just click okay or yes, and sometimes that even includes just the cookie notification at the bottom of a website where if you don't accept it, you can't move on to the website. Most people not only don't have the time or the wherewithal to read it, but oftentimes these things are so extensive and the language within these terms and conditions is so built with legalese that most people, you know, with the average citizen's ability to comprehend wouldn't even understand what that stuff was, right? And so as we think about all these applications that we use, as James said, you know, convenience versus privacy, most of them have the terms and conditions in a link somewhere, and it's usually this little box and you click I accept without ever looking at the terms and conditions. And I am absolutely not throwing daggers, I do the same thing because we just don't have the capacity to read through all the pages. As part of research for the book that I wrote, I went to Facebook and looked at their privacy policy, and it looks innocuous when you first look at it. It's a one pager, except there's 7 or 8 links, and it's going back about a year ago, but 7 or 8 links within that one pager. It's as you click on each of those links, it brings you to another one pager that might have 7 or 8 links, and you end up going down this rabbit hole of content that at some point you just give up, right? And so the point that I'm making here is that all of this information that we are agreeing to give over to whomever the application manufacturer is, or the platform that we're using, this is collected as behavioral data. It's information on the things that you search online, how you engage on websites, what your preferences are. If you do a Google search, it could be the tone or the words that you use. The cookies that are being collected and stored in your browser, the metadata that is stored in your browser. All of this is collectively brought together by data brokers, and then can be used for multiple different reasons. Some of the legal versions of using that information is data broker sells it to a particular organization, and they're going to use that data about you, that profile that's been created from millions of data points, and they're going to use it to market to you, right? Not a big deal. Doesn't seem like it's too crazy. It's the reason why you talk about something and then all of a sudden you get an ad for it. Well, just so you know, a lot of the applications that you're agreeing to the terms and conditions ask for permission to use your microphone, use your camera, and you're allowing them to do that, whether the application is running or not, right? And so when you talk about things and you say, I don't understand how I just got that ad pop up, that's how that happens. So it's a little bit creepy, but it is legal, and you agreed to allow that information to be collected. So from a nefarious actor perspective, though, this information could also be garnered from data brokers. It could be used, garnered through open source intelligent formats and used to either digitally target an individual, such as identity theft, or even worse, it could be used as reconnaissance for kinetic action against an individual or their loved ones. James really, really put that well when he said, would you allow some stranger to walk through your home and take pictures of the layout of your house? Absolutely not. That seems ridiculous. However, our children are online snap mapping and Snapchatting and doing all these things and giving out the location of where they are. And very, very quickly, if someone wanted to target James as an FBI, analyst because he worked on a particular case, they can go and find where their children are. They can threaten the school. They can threaten children. They can find out where his wife goes to the gym, right? What church they go to. Very, very easily, just based on information that people are putting out online. So we really have to think through, it's not just about the individual, me, the person, but we have to think about, if I'm in law enforcement and maybe I have no social media, but my family members do, and I graduated from the academy and grandma's posting pictures of me graduating from the academy on her social media account. How quickly that can be used against me. There are free tools online that somebody can do a photo search. They put a photo search in the tool, and now they can pull up anytime that face shows up, online. These are free tools that are available to anyone. So we really need to think about, the threats that we face in terms of individuals, whether it be digital threats or kinetic threats. And then we really have to think about what is the greater impact. A lot of people, when I talk about digital exhaust, they kind of say to me, well, what's the big deal? It's out there. I can't do anything about it. And through the digital exhaust guide, it is so prescriptive. There are so many things that we can do to kind of fight back and take back control of our own data. So it's bad enough when we think about the individual and the fact that nation states no longer target, it's no longer nation state against nation state when we think about, warfare. It's nation state against individuals. And they use those individuals to weaponize against organizations. And so I want to just leave you with the idea that, first of all, your digital exhaust is valuable, and it's something that you can take control over if you take the steps. But also, you also need to understand that your digital exhaust can impact the organization that you're working with. And with that, I'd like to pass the baton over to my colleague, Jody, so that she can kind of dive a little bit more deeper into the organizational impact of digital exhaust.
Thank you, Antoinette and James. I realize that we are providing a lot of information in a very short period of time. So feel free to start thinking about questions and queue them up in the chat. We will have an opportunity in just a short bit to answer any questions you might have. So building upon what James and Antoinette have presented, the individual level is really the one of the most vulnerable places and vectors of exploitation to organizations, to supply chains, to critical infrastructure, and ultimately to massive threats that affect our national security. So with that, I'd like to put up the next poll question, please. To what extent has your organization conducted an impact assessment of sensitive and proprietary information in the wild, for example, and protected digital exhaust as it relates to your organization? When we talk about digital exhaust, yes, it relates to the individuals, but it also exists for organizations. In addition to the Internet of Things, if you think about it, and the personal information you might think of as being in the wild, for example, identification, that you might have to social media, some of the data points that Antoinette went over. Let's take a little picture of that. There's also digital exhaust left by your infrastructure, all of your devices, your softwares. Every time they're communicating and connecting, when your employees, your vendors, your software integrators come into your organization and they have their own devices, the low-hanging fruit really will mitigate the majority of risk to your organization that you or your organization ends up socializing into the supply chain, and potentially could affect all of us at a national security level. To understand what is going on from an attacker's perspective, what they are really doing is, they take a long time sometimes to do the reconnaissance, to not only do the research on your employees, but potentially your vendors and your integrators, and who has administrative passwords that aren't employees of your organization. A lot of times it is these integrators. And a lot of times what they do, and a great example of an exploit that has been used time and time again, are integrators coming in, they have a USB device, they plug it in to the network, and this USB device has been all over town and whoever, all other types of places, and was injected with an exploit that was able to spread in this method throughout all of the organizations that this particular integrator, went to. As a result, a lot of these exploits, as some of you may know, aren't discovered until months down the road, if at all. So the risk is great. As James mentioned, weapons of mass disruption, whether it is espionage for purposes of espionage within your organization, trade secrets, that type of situation, or it is more nefarious, interrupting electrical power during winter, or some of these more extreme cases that we know that can happen. So the attackers really count on the fact that human beings are lazy, that a lot of the things that we can do to protect are the really basic things, just like in sports, return to the basics. And as James mentioned, it really is a mindset exercise, and what I refer to really in the realm of cognitive security. So things like fatigue, complacency, laziness, to just harden your password. That is such a basic thing. To follow through with the patches if you're in an if you are in an environment where it's possible to do that. We know in some industrial control systems it's not possible because of the impact and the age of the systems. So you really need to do everything you can to harden the perimeter around that. Very basic things from an IT perspective, great, really good network segmentation, etc. But so much of it really does come down to the mindset and the culture of the organization. The first poll that we had today, James asked, he said, what is more important to you, privacy or convenience? And the majority of you said that it was privacy. But the reality is there's something called the privacy paradox. It is the reality of what we say matters to us, and then the reality of what actually matters to us when the temporal component is introduced. For example, you are on a tight deadline. You don't have time to, take the 5 minutes to just change your password to something that's stronger, especially if your system of remembering is a sticky note on your monitor. Or within the organization, if you say that no, privacy is important, but then the choices come down to a mindset of cost, which is more of like an IT perspective, versus the perspective from your operational technology side, which supports your ability to continue manufacturing and generating revenue. So there is a lot to unpack here. I invite you to reach out to us for more information and to continue the conversation. And we really recommend at least getting the guide that we have a new one coming out on February 14th, so in a couple of weeks, and then through InfraGard International. If you are a member, great. Go ahead and send us your contact information if you'd like to join our cross-sector council. You are more than welcome. And if you're not a member of InfraGard, go ahead and send us your information as well if you're interested in joining. We'll make sure that gets passed along to the appropriate people. And we will be making some training available through InfraGard at no charge to all of the members nationally. Training is also available to government agencies and industry, particularly organizations involved in critical infrastructure and supplying our supply chain. And so with that, I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Keeper Sharkey, and she'll help start to bring us home.
Hello, everyone. Dr. Sharkey here. I am a PhD in quantum chemistry and chemical physics, 2015, and I started my own company in 2018 during the National Quantum Initiative, and it's owed L3C. I'm working on chemical simulations, and in the last few years, I've been pivoting to understand cybersecurity, encryption, and what is happening to data and the information that we all put out there, right? So the digital exhaust. So I joined the team very recently in the last month, and I'm here to serve Jody, Antoinette, and James to understand what the effects of quantum are in the industry and how can we actually use it potentially to actually make things more secure instead of less secure, right? And so our adversaries are currently putting out information about how they think that they can use quantum to break encryption. And the idea is that they steal the information now and that they'll encrypt later when they have the technology to do so. And so we need to start protecting ourselves now by ensuring that the stuff that we put out there and the data that we're putting out there isn't anything that can make us vulnerable now and in the future. And one thing I'd like to point out that Antoinette said, she mentioned kinetic attacks that can take place on your family members or yourself due to the information that you put out there. And what I'd like to bring to the attention of everybody attending today is that perhaps our definition of what kinetic actually means might not include quantum effects. And so we have to really be cognizant of the fact that there could be another layer to what kinetic means in terms of quantum. And so I want people to start thinking about that. And I'm going to keep it short because I know we're coming up on time for questions, but I have recently published a book, Quantum Chemistry and Computing for the Curious. I try to leave it high level. So if you're interested in learning more about quantum, you can pick this up and I'll put the link in the chat. And I do have a poll question for everybody. So if you put the poll question up, thank you so much. To what extent is your organization investing in quantum impact analysis and related proactive mitigations? And I just want to say thank you for attending today and listening to our panel on this. I think we all agree that data and our privacy and our safety and well-being is very valuable in today's ecosystem. Wonderful. And with that, I'll pass it back to James or the moderator.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Dave. My apologies.
James. I know that we read there's a couple of questions there in the Q&A, and I know Jody said she would like to handle one of them, but if you got some more stuff to bring up, we still have at least 6 or 8 minutes.
I'll just throw this out for the good of the order. This was, in this half hour of power, right? This was a power-packed panel. Each of these ladies, it's interesting, right? Like if you were to look at what they did individually, you may not think that it would cross, but it really does, right? And so you have people like Antoinette who have been in the fight for a long time doing this, right? And then you have Jody and Dr. Sharkey who are really looking forward to the future, and you're looking at this convergence, right? So I think about an all hazard symposium, and I think about severe weather because that's been a lot of the panels that you guys have. And from a digital exhaust perspective, it's a perfect storm. No, you're not that old. You look wonderful, Antoinette. But with that being said, right, all hazards are in play, right? When you see that severe weather update and it's like all hazards are in play, it's go time, it's show time, right? So like we have to be real about this threat, right? I bleed red, white, and blue. I love this country, right? But nothing spangles my stars more than inauthenticity. And we've got to be real about it. And that's what we're doing here. And so you are important, you matter, your privacy matters. It's a fundamental thing, right? Did you ever think in 2023 that you'd be hearing that from an FBI employee? Guess what? We respect your privacy. We are bound by constitutional obligations. InfraGard is our mechanism to bring us together as Americans and work together. And so that's really what I care about is you as an individual, you have that fundamental right. We should be able to feel safe. And that's what matters. And that's what these ladies are bringing. And I appreciate them for that.
Thanks, James. Well, I'll tell you what, marketing is everything. And there was a lot of really good information shared here, but the one I'm going to take away is weapons of mass disruption. And for 42 years in the electric industry dealing with emergencies, it used to be the Office of Emergency Management. I think yesterday somebody coined it as the Office of Everything Management. So it's not just storms, it's anything that can be disruptive to your everyday, and you put it earlier, your convenience, right? So let's go. The first question Charlotte had about what can we do to help our senior population with cybersecurity? And I think Jody, you wanted to handle this?
Yeah, I'll take this one. And again, really what we can do to help our grandmother or parent for example, who's living in assisted care or even still living on their own is not a whole lot different than what we would do as first measures at enterprise organizations. And that is looking at the human factors, beginning with the very basics, eliminating single points of failure, for example, whether that is a password that you reuse the same on every single system, or it is the lack of, just basic cybersecurity maintenance and hygiene. But what we would do for your elderly loved one would be the same, and it would be um, working diligently to remove uh, publicly available information. And let me tell you, people are lazy by nature, and you couple that with persistent algorithms designed to maximize your engagement so that they can harvest more and more data, it becomes extremely challenging very quickly. So I would just say, the first things you can do are just the real easy mitigation steps across the board that include things like hardening your password, changing your password, and just developing some security around phishing attempts and other types of social engineering, which we go through in great detail in the guide and our basic training that we provide.
Great answer, Jody. Thanks a lot. And the last question that we have in here so far is from Dell. As an individual, what are the top 3 to 5 basic things we can do to minimize our digital exhaust on laptop and smartphones? And I think Antoinette, you want to handle this one?
Yeah, I'll be quick because I know we're running out of time. So the first thing I would do is use your browser as incognito as you can. If you aren't using a browser that's incognito or a DuckDuckGo, something like that, make sure that you clear your cookies every time you close your browser. So that's something that you can do that will at least mitigate the cookies and some of the metadata. Also be very, very mindful of the applications that you use and how those applications collect your data. Specifically stay away from a lot of the social media applications like the TikToks and Snapchats of the world, because that information is being shared with international, without getting into the politics or geopolitics of things. But some of these applications are run by nation state actors, and therefore be cognizant of the information that you're posting on there. And then obviously, there are data brokers that are out there that you can go and opt out. There's quite a few of them. The guide actually specifies many of them, going in and just opting out of your data being collected. And then of course, when a website asks if you would like to be, what your cookie preferences are, make sure that you're unchecking the targeted cookies for marketing and only use the cookies that are required for functionality for the website. There's a guide that tells you all the things, but those are the 3 to 5 things that I think are really easy, actionable things that you could do on a daily basis. And of course, mitigate the amount of information you're putting out about yourself. Do not share every place do not check into where you're going. Do not share, every place you're going. Do not share when you're on vacation, actively, like while you're there. Make sure that you keep that information close by.
Yeah, it's amazing some of the conveniences that social media provide to us also open up the doors to a lot of stuff you would never have thought about 5-10 years ago. So, well, I appreciate it. Power half hour. Great analogy, James, whoever you are.
Still here, Dave, still here.
I know
But and so much of what you guys touched on briefly and real quick is it is multi-generational, right? Like, let's get back to basics. Go check on your grandparents, right? So like, the phone is going to be the vector, right? Like, come up with a password for grandma and grandpa, because, people are out there and they think it's fun to scam people and they think it's okay to steal their money, right? So like Antoinette talked about, Jody, Dr. Sharkey, it really is evaluate what it looks like for you. It's going to be different. So for my grandparents, it would have been the phone, right? God bless them. They're both gone, but come on, people, let's check on our grandparents. We can do this.
Absolutely. I know I Skype my mom once a week, and it takes 3 times for her. She has a computer for email and Skype. It takes 3 times for her to get to the point where she has a camera and the microphone working at the same time without hanging up. I can just imagine what's happening when she's on her email, what she's doing to get through and talk to some of the folks, and what data she's sharing out there and what's going on, what she's leaving behind as she goes. So I tell you, this is really, really good information. Before this seminar, this resilience summit, I had not heard the terminology digital exhaust. It was mentioned once about a week ago, and I probably heard it 15 times now in the last week. So you guys are on the cutting edge. James, Antoinette, Jody, and Dr. Sharkey, really do appreciate your time. We could probably go on for hours on this topic. If you want any more information from it, I believe all of their LinkedIn, our contact information is in the chat. So if you want to get a hold of them or reach out further to them, that's a great way to do it. And thank you all for your time and weapons of mass disruption. I'm going to remember that for a long time. Appreciate it.
Laura, Dave, thanks for being the real MVPs too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thank
To
you.
answer that quick question, there was a mention of how to get that guide again. If you can remind people the guide that you
Yeah,
referenced.
so the digital exhaust guide is distributed through the FBI. If you're an InfraGard member, we'd really encourage you to join the Digital Exhaust Cross Sector Council. That's where we primarily work with and disseminate the training for the guide. But James, is there a way outside of InfraGard to gain access to the guide?
Right now, no.
Right.
We did that because we didn't want to leave this WMD on the street, right? Like, because we have unfortunately adversaries that would exploit that. So there is no cost to join InfraGard. There were some hiccups over the holidays and they're working to address that. So, but there's no cost. You have to be tied to a critical infrastructure sector. There are 16 of those. And so there's a lot of different ways to join. But part of what we're trying to do is, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to speak on a forum like this. So we're trying to push that forward. Unfortunately, we have to take some steps to protect that information. But our goal is to try to get that in everyone's hands. And we're going to continue to try to do a better job of getting things in people's hands because we're dealing with a lot of different modalities.
Okay, great. Thanks again to our amazing experts for starting off our day right today. Thank you so much.